Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you joining us today. We have a wonderful webinar ahead. Just to get us started and let other folks join, go ahead and pop in the chat box where you work and where you're located. It's always fun to see where everyone's coming from. I think we had one of these on Tuesday. We had folks from Nairobi and Australia and different places. So we always like to see where you're located, what time zone you're in, bless your heart for some of you, and even who you work with. Feel free to share. So I love seeing all the locations and the amazing organizations that are joining us today. We're looking forward to this webinar. We've got some great experience with Diana and Matt. And so it looks like I've given a few minutes here. Let's see, I see Houston. I see Maryland. I'm in Maryland. Let's see, North Carolina, Las Vegas, Chicago. Love it.
Little
Hawaii.
Lexington, some Canada,
Glad
Jacksonville.
been thinking about y'all in Hawaii this week, that's for sure. Virginia, Orlando. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Glad to have all of you. Well, let's go ahead and begin. Welcome to Veritus Group's webinar, 3 Strategies for a Standout Year in Giving Season. I'm Karen Kendrick, Senior Director of Client Engagement here at Veritus, and I'll be working behind the scenes to help you as Diana and Matt present today. So before I introduce them and we get started, let me explain a couple things about how we'll be working the system today. Please, 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 so I can keep track of all of your great questions throughout the webinar, pop those into that Q&A box at the bottom. Feel free to put things in the chat, but if you can put your actual questions in the Q&A box, that really helps me keep track. Make sure I don't miss one of your great questions because I'll be asking those for answers at the end of the webinar. Also, you'll be receiving a link to the recording of this webinar and also a PDF version of the slides in the next few days. So as you're listening, you don't have to take a picture of every slide or write everything down. That will all be coming to you as well. And lastly, we have an international audience today, and you can turn on closed captions to support your learning today. With that, I'll pass it over to Diana for a brief introduction.
Thanks, Karen. She said, I'm Diana Frazier. I'm a senior client experience leader here at Veritus, which just means I've been around longer than my colleague there, Matt. I had 32 years of frontline fundraising experience myself in a variety of different types of nonprofits that you see there. I'm interested in running, reading, and I have a very, very, very active dog named Ortley, named after Ortley Beach, New Jersey. On to you, Matt.
Thanks, Diana. Hey, everyone. My name's Matt. I'm coming at you from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Client experience leader, number of years in the nonprofit fundraising space. Years and years ago, I was a client of Veritus. Diana, do you remember any of that?
I do remember. I was your coach.
She was my coach. So you've got the senior client experience leader in Diana. You've got me. And let's see, I have a background also in the U.S. military, still in the Navy Reserves, former college croquet caddy. We're gonna move on from there right quick and get into the content. Hit it, Diana.
Okay, thanks, Matt. We have some pretty clear objectives today. They're straightforward. We want to discuss the importance of creating a really focused plan, particularly as it fits into the year-end communication. So you're thinking this helps you get through October through December, which is crazy. Learn how to identify the right donors to reach out to at year-end. You don't need to be reaching out to all your donors on this particular topic at year-end, and talk about strategies for getting meetings, whether that's face-to-face, phone, whatever. And we want to understand the ways you need to collaborate with your internal teammates, because there's a lot that happens right now that requires other people in your team and communications, research, whoever, to pull together so that you have a good plan and foundation going in. Okay. So before we get started on today's actual topic, I want to just take a step back and talk a little about Veritus. I know many of you who are listening right now are probably pretty familiar, but there are some who are always new. But we are passionately relationship focused, and everything we do is grounded in a data-driven approach. That's where we always start. And this dynamic is critical to the system, the structure, and the strategy we have found to be successful in mid, major, and plan giving programs, all of them. Something Jeff, our principal partner, recognized years ago from his time in direct response is that data is powerful. So when we found that most major gift programs were missing this critical piece, we knew it had to be an important part of our approach. And we've been applying that for, I think, 15 years now, something like that. Over the last several years, we've had the opportunity to work with thousands of major gift officers, mid-level, and plan giving officers, many on a weekly basis through our consulting work, the coaching calls that Matt and I were talking about. So we know firsthand how this approach has helped organizations of all sizes. And we mean that you might have one fundraiser who's doing it all, to you might have 30 major gift officers. And we've worked with that whole spectrum. But it helps, no matter what size you are, to focus and create authentic donor relationships that lead to a stronger donor pipeline and really greater net revenue. So that's kind of the background of who Veritus is. And what we found is that as we've gone through this process, the lack of data was really shocking. It really still amazes us how many nonprofits don't adequately consider the data piece of this work. We think relationship and we think we're left brain, right brain, and we can cut that right brain off, but we need it in this. But we root everything we do in objective fact, not our personal opinion. We formed our recommendations through insight from analysis of millions of donor records and work with thousands of fundraisers and leaders. So you can see here, these are some of the pretty phenomenal organizations over the years that as we work with them, we continue to learn and develop our strategy and approach based on the real world situations that we're in. So that's a great snapshot, and I've been privileged to work with several of those up on the screen. So really, with the fall and year-end fundraising season fast approaching, I know tomorrow's August 1, and it's in the high 80s and about to storm here in the Philadelphia area. So it seems like it's far away, but it is not. We know you can have an even more successful year end without making you more overwhelmed or more overworked. So let's start digging in on this. Our promise to you with this webinar is that if you follow our advice, you'll break down some obstacles that are stopping you from having a successful year end because you'll focus on the right donors and raise more revenue. Okay, I think we're ready for you, Matt.
Let's do it. Thanks, Diana. Let's launch on this first strategy for year end. You have to have a specific year end communication plan. And a lot of fundraisers, there's this expectation that you need to reach out to every donor on your caseload at the end of the year. But we actually believe the first step in your year-end plan should be to identify those specific donors you want to focus on. So which donors actually want to give it at year-end, which ones do every year, which donors are behind on their giving this year, and you want to reach out to them one more time. Do you have any donors whose interests align with maybe program needs that arise at year-end? These are the types of questions that'll help you identify the right donors to focus on. And once you have your list, you need to identify each donor's passions and interests. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we also recommend creating, specific year-end goals, possibly also aspirational goals, so you know your target that you're working towards, right? If you've already, we coached this, if you've already cash flowed your goals for the year, you'll already have the year-end component of that cash flow goal for the year. But you want to do it, and so you know where you're going for year end. And then, kind of an anchor of this is you want to have create meaningful donor offers for those donors, and we'll get into all of these pieces a little bit later. So once you've done it, we want to finalize the plan. I mean, specifically the touch points that you're going to need to work that plan. Now, remember, it's a busy time of year for your donors. They may not want to meet in person or at all. They've got grocery shopping, present shopping to do. They got a lot going on. But that doesn't mean they don't want to connect with you. So be flexible and open to their preferences. And you should also try to get your plan done as early as possible so you can start reaching out to your donors before the frenzy starts. And once you're in a position to ask for the gift, do it confidently. and be prepared to partner with the donor and celebrate the impact they're making, no matter how they respond. So a key part of our system and structure is the idea of creating individualized plans for every donor on your major gift caseload, a bespoke plan that takes into account the donor's preferences and interests, and then follow this healthy cycle of touch points that ensure the donor is being reported back to on past gifts and cultivated towards other gifts, especially important at year end for this, right? It's heavy solicitation season. We might be tempted to look for efficiencies, but as my friend Diana always says, we want to be effective, not necessarily efficient. So being effective is the goal. Creating and following plans that accommodate our donors' different preferences, different interests, different ways of engaging with our organization is how we're effective at year end. With my clients, I'm looking at these donor lists now. Who gives at year end? Where are we in our plans for each of them? For one client, her $700,000 caseload is really weighted towards year end. So 500,000 of that 700 comes in between October and December. So she cannot get behind in her planning. And thankfully she's doing the work, and she's been doing it all year, and she knows her donor interests and how they like to hear from her. And she's planning to follow up, and she's blocking her time now to ensure she does, in fact, have time for all this and can execute this robust year-end plan that she has. Now, we recommend that our clients use a mix of touch points, and we've got a whole list included here. And you won't be doing all of these in fourth quarter, but you should be doing all of these over the course of 12 months, right? So you want to talk about the problem. You want to make the ask. You want to thank the donor in personal and variety of ways. You want to share how you made a difference. And there's different ways of doing that listed on the slide there. And then also you want to have connections that are outside of the gift or outside of the organization entirely. A happy birthday. Congrats to your kid graduating high school, etc. But think about which of these kinds of touches are going to be included in your year-end plan. And we also want to make, as we mentioned a second ago, specific revenue goals for year end for the donors you're focusing on. In the last quarter of the year, we typically cash flow goals for the year using our donor engagement plan. But even if you've already done that, use this time as you're looking ahead at year end to review those numbers and those goals. So a few things to keep in mind is working on revenue goals. What's the donor done in the past? It's not that their pattern can't change. It's just that's a good starting place. And when you plan, you're asking for another gift. It's a good starting place to think about. You set the ask for a few weeks before their kind of typical giving time frame. And remember, a lot of times the January 3rd, January 1st gifts actually did kind of come in December. They're really December donors, so you want to make sure you're not excluding those folks. Sometimes donors give, maybe in the summer to a fiscal year end appeal, but they've, understand when they've given so that you can accurately set the goals. And then look at when you plan to ask or when you anticipate their gifts. And if you had planned for a gift in June or, earlier in the year and they didn't give, move that planned ask to the last quarter and figure out how you can make that ask effective. And so all this goes into establishing a realistic revenue goal for year end that you will, by following all these steps, blow out of the water.
Phew. So the second part of the strategy, which Matt tipped a bit in, is you can't focus on every donor caseload for a year-end strategy. You do have donors who give at different times a year, and your solicitation strategy should fit with that. So we're not saying you don't say anything to these donors October through December, but your main focus should be shifting toward the donors that give in this time frame. So let's talk about which donors in particular. You want to be smart about where you put your focus and where you spend your time. All right. So choosing the donors to focus on. Let's go a little deeper here, how you identify them. From what Matt and I said a little bit ago, the very first thing you need to ensure is that you're working with qualified donors. And let me take a step back. What we mean by qualified is that you already have two-way engagement established. If not, this is a bigger effort than you could complete at year end. You may have donors assigned to you that given October through December that you don't have engagement with, you're going to need to use either direct response or an ask letter or something like that to move forward with that. But that's not the same thing as a focused strategy on your year-end donors that you can engage with. All right, so I want to make sure we're distinguishing there. Next, review your caseload for any donors who are off goal. Matt talked a little bit about this. So the way you need to look at it, if you've cash flowed your donors, and by cash flow, we mean, you know, who you put, if you think of a spreadsheet, January through December, you have in each column when you expect that gift to come in. So first thing you want to find out is, tomorrow's August 1. You want to find out who from January through July did not give as you thought they would. And then you want to think about, okay, is it still possible or viable to go forward and move them into this year and quarter so you don't lose sight of them? So that's the first step. Who's off goal, making sure you now have a new plan, and you can follow up on any of those donors to figure out what's going on. Sometimes you might know, sometimes you might know the reason for it. All right. You move the goal forward if it's viable. Then you want to identify any donors you think could make an additional gift this year. Maybe they've indicated that in the past that they'd be open to additional support, or maybe something has come up project or program wise that you know is in alignment with that donor, and say they gave 25,000 in April, but something is coming up. And you might say, Matt, I know you're really interested in the after school program. Something has come up. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it to your attention in case it's something you want to consider. It's really that simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple. But you want to be able to think about your donors in that regard. And then once you've done this analysis, you should land on a good list of people that you're reaching out to, hopefully to get a meeting or another kind of meaningful connection, because that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's focus on meetings themselves. Okay. There's a lot that goes into the whole psychology of a meeting, right? You want to think in terms of how you're feeling about it. It can be a little intimidating sometimes to get face to face with people. It can also be intimidating for the donor. So whether it's phone or Zoom or in person, if you're able to make that kind of connection with a donor, that is fantastic. If the only connection you can make is email exchange or text exchange, please don't discount that. If that's the donor's preference, that's the lane they want to be in, and that's where they're comfortable, you can accomplish a lot there. I have a gift officer who had a donor text his commitment, $1 million commitment, just on in April. So it does happen. So there's a couple things going on that you want to keep in mind. The donor may have some fears around your visit, because it might be something like they'll say you're wasting the organization's money to travel to see just them. They're not that big of a donor. They're not worth your time. Maybe they're a little worried about you coming into their home. If you come in, maybe you'll never leave. Well, eventually you'll leave, right? But they don't have control over your time, right? When you do that. Maybe they are worried about their time, that you're going to take too much time, or they think you're only coming to ask for money. So with that in mind, think about how you ask for a visit, whether it's in person or virtual. It could be something this simple. I'm traveling to Chicago in a couple of weeks. Do you have 30 minutes to meet me at Joe's Coffee House in Rosemont on the 24th or 25th? I'd love to I'd love to update you on XYZ. So think about that. It's specific, so the donor knows the conversation won't be ending. There's a thing there. And you've put it not in their home, in a coffee house, so maybe that feels more comfortable. You have said some date choices, so there's a little more comfort about scheduling. And then you've told them what you want to talk about. I'd love to update you on XYZ. So you've told them the value to the donor. All that goes into play with whether somebody accepts a meeting or not. Now, if you are asking for a gift, in that scenario above, is you're updating them. But if you are asking for a gift, say something like, I'd enjoy talking with you about a project I think you'll enjoy supporting, or something along those lines. You need to let them know that this is about an ask, if it is about an ask. So that's really important. So if they say no, reply with, how about if I let you know next time I'm in town so we can connect? That allows you, often people say, if they say no to the first one, they'll say yes to the second reply. There's just a human dynamic that goes on there. But also it sets the expectation with donor that you do travel. It is part of your job and it's normal to have a meeting. So that's kind of all the getting meetings with donor background stuff. And all of this is predicated on it's qualified donors. You already have engagement. So that should make it easier than donors you've never talked with. So let's talk about meaningful connections themselves. What you have up here is something that might look familiar to you. The chart, awareness, interest, desire, engagement, and then commitment. You might have seen the marketing version, ADA, awareness, interest, desire, action. It's very similar, but applied to the fundraising enterprise, the relationship aspect of fundraising enterprise. So this structure has been proven to work with our clients in building a truly meaningful connection over time. This isn't all in one meeting, although in sales, AIDA is supposed to happen immediately. If you remember that movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, do I have that right? That's all about that. That's always be selling too, right? What you want to do is think through your process over time so that when you get to the time where you ask and there's a commitment, it's a natural course that's happening there. And remember, just being in a meeting with a donor does not make it meaningful. We've heard plenty of stories where at the end of a 30-minute or 60-minute meeting, there really not much happened. It might be that the fundraiser got nervous and stayed on the small talk. It could be that the donor kept derailing it. Whatever happens at the end, no real value in terms of moving forward with the donor's interest in the organization happens. So face-to-face is not the gold standard. Engagement, meaningful connection is the gold standard. It's also important to remember that not every donor wants to meet, either in person or virtually. So again, I said that before, that doesn't mean you can't have meaningful connections without using phone or email or text. Those are all valid ways. And the goal of a meaningful connection is that you're moving the relationship forward. And then when it comes to connecting with a donor in a way that ultimately leads to commitment, these steps that you're doing now lay a foundation that honors the donor. So it should be a natural progression that you've thought about, that you've planned out, and now you're actioning. So let's get into these details. Establish awareness. This happens most often really in our Be Curious stage of permission-based asking. It's where you develop awareness of what the donor cares about as it relates to what your organization does. They might not even know some of the things you do. So in a Be Curious conversation, you could bring up, Matt, I know that you've supported, let's see, the flood relief program. You may not be aware that we have this whole environmental education program. Is that something you'd want to talk about? So you're deepening the conversation, you're learning, you're bringing awareness to other things that could be happening. You just have to apply that to whatever sector you're in, all right? Then the next is that interest. You want to build interest. And as we said, that is, you can go ahead and move the slide there. Yeah. These are steps ahead of asking for the meeting. It's part of the natural progression. And when you're building interest, again, you're bringing things to the donor that they care about and also learning maybe yes, no about something. You're getting feedback. You're asking for feedback from the donor. You could do something simple in an email. Send something to your donor. It has 2 or 3 choices in it and ask a poll, P-U-L, poll question back. Does one of these 3 stand out to you? So that's when you're still learning the interest, and then you can build on that. And then the next is that creating desire. And this is deeper than interest, and it gets more to the heart of what the donor cares about. It sets up to, it's a setup to what the problem is that a person or a program or a project addresses. And it leads to the next natural step, which is how your organization brings a solution to that problem. So you're getting to desire, you're getting to the crux, the need, the gap. That problem that needs to be solved. What is it that your organization is, what's your mission that you're trying to achieve? How does that relate to what the donor thinks about what they see as a preferred future, if you will, about what's going to happen? What do they want to see change? And then you can move on and introduce your organization's solution. And that's where you really get into some donor engagement. This is a back and forth conversation about the problem, the solution your organization brings. You're eliciting the donor's opinions or thoughts. You're going deeper, and you want to develop an alignment that this is something they want to participate in. Sometimes it might be through volunteering. Mostly for fundraisers, it's through a financial gift to help further that. So that's all happening there in that engagement, and you reach the kind of the conclusion of what the donor will do with you. Now, well, actually, let's secure the commitment. Give me a second. This is a really helpful chart, and when you get the PDF, this is one I think you're going to want to spend some time with. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but down the left hand is the topic. Donor is confident and doesn't need to contact. They want privacy. They say they already know what your organization does. The donor doesn't want any pressure for money. In the middle is what you want to align to. So you hear that message. Now you want to align with the donor, and then you have some curiosity questions to unpack that. So if the donor is confident and doesn't need contact, what you're trying to do is gain the donor's input, and you might ask questions that are there, like, let's just take the first one. What have we done to gain such incredible confidence from you? So you're trying to get them to speak back to you a little bit, and then maybe you can move forward because you've aligned on that issue. Let's say the donor already knows what your organization does. The alignment objective would be to learn more about their connection. And you might say, what have we done that has most helped you and understand the mission and programs? Or I want to make sure you get to hear about the incredible difference you are making. Has that happened for you before? And if yes, what was meaningful? All these are designed to, you hear an objection. We're not trying to beat down the objection. We're trying to align to the objection, understand, and then shift if that is a reasonable thing for the donor to do by asking questions, not by demanding, but by asking questions. So then we get on to the secure the commitment, which I kind of jumped ahead of a little bit too before. So you want to keep your focus on the connection that you're making. However, it's set up to have this conversation, whether it's face-to-face, Zoom, phone, or like I said, text, email. And what you're looking for is to have alignment and that you are partnering with the donor on what they care about. The money follows that. So that's where the ask comes in. When you're confident you have alignment and the donor does want to help, then you can move on to the money. And Matt used that word partnering before too, and that's a critical piece. As a fundraiser, you're a partner with your donor and in every conversation because you're helping to lead and move it and respond. And obviously the donor is also engaged, asking and responding as you go. So it's a two-way street there, if you will. Can I use another metaphor? Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Great stuff. And I would take a moment to check in, like, are we doing okay? Are we doing okay? We're rolling through some material here. We promised you 3 strategies for what you need to do to prepare for year end. The third one we're going to talk about is you need to work ahead. You got to plan. You got to be prepared. So what do you need to prepare? One of the biggest mistakes you can make is not preparing far enough in advance. I think attending this webinar in the last few minutes of July is a great start, right? I mean, this is the time to start thinking about it, right? So those points that I just covered are things to do now to get ready. And so this is a busy time. We talk about busy time for your donors. It's a busy time for everyone at your organization. So you're going to need to connect with those internal teams. You're going to need to connect as soon as possible to communicate what you'll need so they have time to help provide that. We mentioned touch points in a second. We'll talk about a couple of ways that that you might need to talk about internally. And you also need to prepare and work ahead so that you can ensure your donor relationship is in the orange to blue side of this slide here. If you haven't been reporting back or showing your donor that they've made a difference, they're unlikely to engage deeply and unlikely to engage with you at all around a year-end gift. And so ask these questions now in the summer of each donor you've identified for year-end. Just to make sure you've adequately reported back before you ask for another gift. And so was the donor thanked? Were they thanked by the organization? Were they thanked by you personally, or by senior leadership personally? Have you sent them updates on the impact of their gift? Do they know what their last gift accomplished? Have you been able to assess how the donor feels about the impact they've made? Has this all been a healthy cycle of communication? Was it well timed in ways the donor prefers? And is it about them and building a relationship with them and an engagement and a partnership with them, and not just about marketing your organization? If yes, now go back to this touchpoint collateral list. These are what you'll need to execute your plan and do any reporting back on prior gifts, right? Some of these pieces are going to require information from finance, from program, support from marketing. So get clear as soon as possible so that everything you need, so you have everything you need to meaningfully connect with your donors as we move into year end. We do want to spend some time specifically talking about donor offers because these require some considerable internal partnership and preparation to execute, and creating meaningful offers is really a cornerstone of your year-end plan. So let's talk about compelling need, believable solution, donor adoption. Let's talk about the problem. You got to identify the problem that your organization exists to solve in human and emotional terms. So, for example, after school program, what's the reason that the after school program is such a lifeline to the child? What's the problem? What does the child's home life look like? Find stories to illustrate that. This will personalize the problem, make it more tangible and real. Focus on the problem and not the process. So, for example, don't tell me the name of a cancer drug. Please don't tell me that. Tell me instead what cancer does to a patient and what the investment will do to make a difference there. Your donors want to solve problems. And so to invite them to solve a problem, you got to articulate the problem. After you describe the problem in human and emotional terms, facts and figures are vital to illustrating this, right? Some donors care a little bit more about facts and figures and are going to ask real detailed questions. Some care a little bit less. It's important for everyone. As you get to know your donor, you'll kind of know how much emphasis to put here. So that can help you figure out how to frame the offer and how much of each should be there. But facts and statistics about the problem, the budget of the program, or the budget of the project, overall costs, and then the impact of what you're proposing. And remember, it's donors give from the heart. So compelling needs, believable solution, and that's what makes a donor adopt the offer you're presenting. One kind of last piece in preparation that we should really talk about is gift processing. Your gift processing team is also headed to their busiest season of the year. And so it's very important. It's also like it's a busy season for them. It's also very important that you are responsive to your donors as they're giving. So have a quick sync, have a stand up with your gift processing and donor operations people. Buy them chocolate. Create a plan for how information will be shared and how gifts will be processed and where fundraisers can find all the important giving information that you're going to need to thank your donors in a timely manner at the end of the year.
Thanks, Matt. That's so true. If you're a leader listening, please go back to that process, the gift processing. Ask your team what's worked, what's not worked, and work for resolution. Because it's true, the gift processors are working as hard as you are, but things go sideways. So we'll get to questions in a minute, but let me ask you, you can go ahead and move this slide there, I think, Karen. If we offered you an opportunity to learn this system and structure so you can create a focus plan for year end, would you be interested? It's kind of hard to imagine that you wouldn't be. So I'm visualizing hands raised across the US, Canada, and wherever else anyone of this. Well, our next offering of the certification courses for both major gift fundraisers and fundraising leaders, they start on August 25th. So that's coming up pretty fast. These courses really have it all and will provide comprehensive training on the system and structure that you can implement to have a successful year end, but also to create meaningful relationships with your donors all year long. It will take the things we discussed today and go deeper and looking at it from a full perspective of a year. I have personally had people tell me when they implemented this, that after their first year of implementing this, they got to December, and for the first time in their career, and this person had been doing it for 15 years, told me this is the first time they were not breathless because they had a system and a structure and they followed it. And then came to Q4 of the calendar year, they were able to action all their plans. So our course is, and our course for fundraising leaders gives you the tools and resources you need to successfully manage your major gift team and your program going through there. So we have a testimonial here. I'll just call it the highlight. Even after, I love this part here, even after a year of the training, even when things went nuts, stuff started to take over, right? The training gave me the skills to reassess, reprioritize, and stay on track of managing my relationships in the with the donors. That's the key. If you have a plan, you can pivot and move. If you don't have a plan, that's really hard to do that. All right. So if you're looking to grow your major gift program or take your work with donors to another level, to this next level we're talking about, this is really a course you don't want to miss. And if you want to get the $200 off our upcoming course, again, they start on August 25th. Go to veritusgroup.com/courses. Could you see me? /courses. And select the certification course for major gift fundraisers or certification course for managers and executives. And then use that coupon code very cleverly,
Oh.
AUG25, August
I
25,
think
AUG.
we had a little freezing.
Am I back? Can you hear me?
I've got you.
Okay. So that code is AUG25MG promo, and that'll get you the $200 discount. And again, just go to veritusgroup.com/courses. Matt?
All right. So to summarize what we talked about today, if you commit to creating a clear and focused plan where you're engaging the right donors and working in partnership with your internal team, then you can have an incredibly successful year-end fundraising season. Plus, you'll be implementing a structure that will truly serve you all year long.
All righty. We have so many great questions, you all. Let's jump in. So, are you able to hear me, Diana and Matt?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
we had a
we
little freezing moment. Good. All right, good. So there's some questions here about choosing the donors, and I'm going to read both of them, and then Diana, you can jump in. So one is, can you further explain why a donor who gives every October through December and will receive a year-end solicitation letter is not part of the year-end strategy? And then that's from Julia. And then Heather asked, how do we build a list? What characteristics does a donor have that should be on a year-end outreach list? So just dive into all of that a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at those two. So they give in October through December, they receive a year-end solicitation. I would put them as part of your year-end strategy. There's the letter piece. Now, what you might not have control of the letter itself, but maybe you do, in which case you can influence how it's worded, but you absolutely want to be a part of the follow-up. If it's not yours, you could say, Karen, I know you received a letter from, John Smith, whoever it is who sent the letter. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So you would want that in your plan. In your plan, you would anticipate the letter going out, and you would anticipate setting a phone conversation or a meeting around that. What I was referring to is not every single donor gives in that time frame. So you don't have to send letters to people who don't give at that time unless you have a purpose or a reason. But the other is, how do we build a list? I think it says, what characteristics does a donor have that should be in year-end outreach? If you're brand new walking in the door and you don't really know these donors yet, the only thing you have two things. One is, do they give at that time frame? In which case they're in your October through December plan because that's when they give. The other might be, as we said before, if there's something coming up programmatically and you can tell from the data system that that's a program or project they care about, you can bring them into that time frame as well. That's if you don't know anything, you're walking the door, you want to get engaged qualifying donors, but the fact of the matter is December 31 is coming and you need to move forward. So do it, trust the donor history. Some other things will happen organically, but trust the donor history. Now, if it's donors you've qualified, ideally you do know when they give, and you can create a plan for when you're going to do that ask in Q4. Or as we said before, something is coming up that you might want to ask them to consider additional gift. Or you might even be getting a meeting for the next calendar year too. That all might be in there. I hope I covered what was intended by those questions.
Thank you, Diana. Matt, Heather asked, and we have a mid-level course starting the same time as this major gift course. So, and then Matt, you can pop it back on the code for folks while we ask questions. That way they can have it if they need it. So Heather asked a great question, Matt. For those of us who are mid-level donor officers who work one to several, what recommendations when meetings aren't part of our work? So how do you apply what you've been discussing to mid-level?
Yeah, I think taking that meaningful connection concept and applying it to your interactions with your caseload. You're not going to go out and get breakfast and spend an hour and a half and really get into it. But you are going to do everything short of that, right? So you are going to be sending out emails with poll questions, trying to generate some responses from folks. You are going to be making phone calls. You are going to be having those conversations with donors. Certainly on the phone, potentially even over Zoom if you're keeping it short. You've got a lot more donors to work with in mid-level, and so you're not doing the traveling and the face-to-face piece of it, but you are having meaningful connections, and you want to do everything in your power to make those connections as meaningful as possible.
Great. Just a quick little ditty from James. What would it take to add a column to the DEP, the categories for choosing donors to focus on? Diana, how do you sort of figure out who you're focusing on for what things in the DEP? That's a great question, James.
Yeah,
And
there
know
is
what the DEP is.
yeah, the donor engagement plan is a Veritus workbook, very sophisticated workbook that helps you manage your caseload, the people, their preferences, touch points throughout the year, when they give, and all that sort of thing. There is something called caseload rationale. You could use that column and put in it your reason for that. What we just always recommend is you be consistent in how you do things, that how you write things, because then you can filter it and you can find the 12 people you wrote that for as an idea. Or you could go to any of the actual monthly columns, September, October, November, December, and key in that action for the specific donors. And again, if you're consistent in how you type it, when you hit the filter, the 30 people that you want to do X with will be easy to focus on. I think that's the easiest way to use the donor engagement plan to get there. I don't think you need to add anything. I think you just need, when you're using it as a planning tool, think how will not only will I look at it, but how can I use filtering and sorting to get me where I want to go. Do you think, Matt, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, there's columns for typical giving month, and there's columns for each month's giving. I mean, there are sections on we've built in there in the donor engagement plan, like there's some spare columns for if you have to add
Yeah.
something that's not there, whether it's like alumni year or things like that. Are they a freedom partner or something of that sort? Some kind of membership. But yeah, like if you feel like you don't have the column you need, go ahead and use one of those. But I like what you said, Diana, about putting it right in that case of ration, keeping it consistent.
Yeah.
Great idea. So, Diana, if you'll just read to yourself, I'm going to ask Matt a question, Meg's question, so you can be ready for that. And then Matt, anonymous questions here says, I've been hearing from my supervisor about donor fatigue potentially being an issue this year end. Can you talk about any trends specific to this Q4 or ideas on how to navigate?
Yeah, lots of talk about how are donors approaching giving this year in particular, and it's certainly there's a lot going on in the news. There've been a lot of changes, a lot in the with federal funding changes, with kind of vibes. Um, I would I would encourage you that in times of great uncertainty and when your organization is facing huge challenges, especially if you're an organization that's impacted by federal funding cuts or by other changes that are happening in the governmental level, um, when you're in an organization like that, investing in relationships with folks who care about your organization, who care about the problems that your organization exists to solve, that when you have those you lean into those relationships and you have qualified donors and you are reporting back on impact, you're sharing how your organization is making a difference, those donors will step up in a bigger way than normal when the need is great. And donors want to be invited to solve a problem. Maybe your organization this year is facing bigger problems than you have in the past. And that's something to be clear to donors about and to invite them to be part of the solution. And so I encourage you there that while there can be, a huge note of uncertainty, there can be a lot of doom and gloom in the news. Often in those times, donors do step up and do partner with you to make a big impact.
Thank you, Matt. And I popped in the chat box. I accidentally put the donor impact portfolio in there as a resource, which is great. That's how we take all of your budget and against the program, so you actually know what each program costs and how much how much it's supported so far. So that's interesting too. But there's also white paper there on the DEP. I popped in the chat box. So Diana, back to Meg's question.
Sure. Her question has to do with they're going to have their first time ever an annual event in October, and they'll be making a significant announcement at that time. And the question is, if we have staff or board members who have relationships with people who give to our year-end appeal in November, any reason we should consider not inviting any of those donors? So my first question is to unpack it is there a little concern here about credit, so to speak, that if they come to this event and they give, that means you lose credit, so to speak, on the appeal. So sort that out internally, because from the donor perspective, it just doesn't matter. They're supporting the organization, and you can work out credit issues separately. But what I would say is I would invite people, and I would even say something like, Matt, I know you've, last 3 years you've given at the letter we send you in November. I really hope you'll come to this event here on October 5th. There's a lot that's going to be presented that I think will be of interest to you, and it may help you as you think about your year-end giving. Now, the event might call for an ask there, or the event might have a follow-up ask thing, or it might default back to the letter. But you're acknowledging to the donor when they normally give, this is special, you think it'll be valuable to them. So I would use it. I would leverage it personally.
Thank you. Thank you. Got a couple number of questions about meetings. So one, Matt, is how do I leverage the fact that I'm not traveling to their city? They're just all in my city to get meetings. And then what do I do if I've got donors all across the country? Like, what are some ways to get meetings with folks that are local, and what are some ways to get meetings with folks that are across the country, or ways to meaningfully connect?
Yeah, I think with what some of the examples that Diana gave earlier around securing meetings did involve travel. A time bound. I'm going to be in town for these 2 days. Are you around? Can I meet you at this place at this time? And that remains a great way of like securing a meeting, saying, hey, I'm in. There's a limited time offer only. I'm only here for a short time. If all your donors are local, it's there's still often compelling reasons to meet, right? Hey, it's been a long time since we checked in. Hey, I know a lot's going on. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee, whatever. I'd love to share a little bit more about the impact of this program that you care a lot about. I'd love to sit down and over some lunch and just chat about it. There's a lot of ways of kind of making that. It doesn't have to be an urgency, time bound sort of make the case for a meeting. They care about the organization. They care about what the impact of their gift. So and maybe they are it's on their mind to think about the next step in their giving, to think about their next gift too. So it's never weird to sort of ask for a meeting in that front. On the traveling side, I always like to talk to folks about, if you've got donors everywhere, you want to have like an anchor visit in a place before you really book travel to that place. But what I mean by anchor visit is like one of your heavier hitting donors, one of your top tier donors that really does make the cost of travel and your time to that area worth the organization's investment, right? So if you don't want to fly across the country to meet with 2 donors giving $1,000 each, that's maybe not the right use of the organization's funds. But if you are able to secure those top tier donors, and then say that sets your dates, and then you've got that time bound invitation you can send to everyone else. Diane, anything you want to add to that?
If you're local, you could, if it works for your organization, inviting them in to see the work, that kind of a tour or visit a program or service or something you're doing. You can't do that if they're national, if the donor's national, but your organization's local. And I think you put the weight on the value of the meeting. The meeting's not valuable because you're flying in. The meeting is valuable because you're bringing something to them that they care about, and you're going to go deeper with them. And you can give them very devoted, non-distracted time. That's the value. So you want to play up that part of it. What's in it for the donor? There has to be something that the donor cares about, and that's why they're meeting with you.
Thank you all. Great question here for you, Diana, from Holden. What advice do you have for someone who's new to an organization, is making meetings with donors who have relationships with the previous person in your position, or the CEO or owner who is delegating those donors' conversations to you? So how do you take the baton and build an authentic relationship when someone already has one or has had one?
Yeah. Well, one shout out, Matt and I once did a podcast on inheriting a caseload. So you can search for that in Veritus, the podcast on inheriting a caseload, because that's going to help you. But I mean, I think you either in your intro letter or your intro email or your call, you name it. I know that my former colleague, so-and-so used to reach out to you. I'm new in the role. I'd love to connect with you. And again, it goes back to, I can see that he or she did XYZ. I'd love to continue that. Are you open to meeting personally to do that? If there's a CEO or someone else involved, you can say that they asked you to personally reach out. Ideally, in those situations, the CEO, whoever, has done the introduction for you and has smoothed that pathway for you. If I'm the CEO and I manage a donor and I want to give that donor to Matt, I need to introduce Matt to the donor. And then that's a much more natural thing for Matt to pick up and go forward on. So you may have to be going back to the person who is giving you the donor and ask them to step up to that point, because it really doesn't work if they don't do that piece. It just doesn't. Well, it can, but it's hard.
Thank you. Matt, would you ever send a cold proposal or letter with an ask? For instance, if you can't get a meeting with someone who is normally engaged, maybe life is busy.
I'd never surprise someone with it. I'd make the attempts to connect with the donor, right? And we talked about qualification a little bit. Have we established two-way communication with this donor? And if you've got a sense of what that donor cares about, and that donor wants to engage, and you just can't make the timing work to sit down and sync up calendars and have the conversation, in that case, I would use the various emails, text communication at my disposal to let them know that something is on its way.
Yep.
And that I hope they consider it, and I'm here to answer any questions that come up for them. And when you can't have that personal interaction around the ask, you do have to make extra efforts to make sure it's not a surprise when a solicitation of major gift magnitude arrives in their mailbox. And you want to just make sure that they're expecting it, that they know you're always available to answer the questions, that you'll be following up to check in and see what's coming up for them, and how they're feeling about that proposal. So I would never cold send it. There's a lot of work that has to go into to ensure those lines of communication are open.
Yep. 100%.
Thank you. So this next question, Diana, is the first one on the list here, anonymous. So great question. Our organization is always interested in general support. So we have most flexibility, not really promoting specific projects or programs. So of course we'll accommodate. We work with food insecurity, social services, wraparound homelessness, and domestic violence. How to make a general support across all of our program areas versus specific select programs. So speak to that topic.
Yeah, so that's where, if you take the time with the donor impact portfolio that did get popped in there for you also, take advantage of that. If you really understand the costs of your programs across the board, we talk in terms of cost equivalency thing. Matt, as you think about your support this year, I know you've been particularly interested in the work with people who are homeless, and feeding issue and food issues around that. Are you open to considering a gift of $25,000 this year that really goes toward the programs and services we offer, which includes that very important work? So you bring it in, you don't tell them it's going to do that if it's not going to be restricted to that, but you can still put it within the context of it. Most owners are sophisticated enough to understand that too.
So, Matt, this is from Laura. This is a common challenge. Small organization, they have an event, concerned about the fact that they're going to solicit donors at the event. Am I right or wrong to worry that this event specific ask could interfere with broader end of year giving? How do you manage events? We talked a little bit about this, but let's be clear again. Like, what do you do when there's an ask and you want to make an ask?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. You want to make sure that you're not fighting. You as the major gift officer are not fighting with the events team over who gets credit for the gift, and if it comes in at the event, you don't, et cetera, et cetera. Like, don't have those fights. If you are having those fights, stop. Um, but if you have a year-end event with an ask planned for attendees at the event, and you've got donors who you have relationships with who are also attending that event, you can talk to them in advance and plant the seed that maybe the event would be a time when your generosity could inspire increased generosity at the event. Your gift could be part of a match pool that then is used at the event to make solicitations more effective. But you can have a conversation with those donors so that the event is a component of your year-end plan. And for some donors who you think will give at the event, maybe that becomes a solicitation plan for your donors, and you lay the groundwork to make sure that that's a successful solicitation for them. Um, Anything else I'm missing on that, Diana?
I don't
She
think
at the bottom here, Matt. We aren't asking at the event. We're asking for donations to purchase items to give to clients at the event. Oh, okay, so there's other asks going on. Yeah,
Okay.
I
I
think the
think you
same.
contextualize that with the donor. Say, you've been incredibly generous. Here's something that might be another way for you to have an impact around the problem that they want to solve. You don't have to set up as of competition. Don't go with a scarcity mindset. Go with an open mindset, like of the other ways the donor can participate.
Yeah, treat them like an insider, like a partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got to jump off to get on another meeting. So I'm going to hand this over to you all. You got 3 minutes left. There's a great question at the top here. What are effective ways to say to donors how they make a difference, impact or difference? I'll pass it on to you, Diana. Thank you all so
Sure.
much. We'll see you soon.
All right.
All right.
The language we tend to talk about a lot is cost equivalency. So if you really do know your budget, you understand that $5,000 is the equivalent of such and so, you could say, Dan, thank you so much for your generosity. As you think about your giving at year end this year, are you open to considering a gift of 5,000? That has the impact of something like, or it's the equivalent of, an after school program for 30 children, or it might be, what it's the equivalent of. You're not, again, promising a direct relationship. You're talking about conceptually. And if you're using that's the equivalent of, you'll get there.
And then I think I'll add to that stories can be very effective. You say, there's your gift is the equivalent of putting 30 kids through this summer program, and that's really exciting. Let me tell you the story of Diana, who is 5 years old, and who, and so you like kind of adding that anecdote, that storytelling piece on top of that can be really effective.
Okay, let's see if there's one from RuPaul. What do you think about creating a major gift opportunity for making the machinery work instead of a specific program support or endowment or naming opportunity? I don't know if you mean literally the machinery work, but that sounds like it's a restricted gift, and that's perfectly fine. You can ask someone to give a one-time gift of $25,000 to purchase this piece of equipment. What you can also do is maybe ask for 35,000 or 30,000 and say to them, 25,000 is for the purchase of equipment and 5,000 is for our general operations. It's not really a tax, if you will, but you can build an operational piece into restricted gifts. That's not difficult to do.
And as long as you know what your donor cares about, and if they're asking you, hey, what needs do you really have, and you really have this machinery need, you can absolutely make that
It's
Okay.
budget relieving, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Let's wrap it up here. We're getting to time. Thanks, Diana, and thank you all of you for being with us today. As a reminder, you will be receiving a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slide deck as later today or in the next while. So to register for our upcoming session of the certification course for major gift fundraisers and fundraising leaders, visit us at veritusgroup.com/courses. Use the code. I'm going to read it. Here we go. OG25
There
MG
you go.
promo. Use that code to check out to get $200 off when you sign up by next Friday.
Yep.
And as always,
you can find either of us on LinkedIn if you want to ask another question that we didn't get to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for your engagement. We're always available to assist you by email at academy@veritusgroup.com. Oh boy, veritusgroup.com. And we hope to see you all in the near future.
Thanks, Matt. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.